Hi there, Pastor Lars Hammer from Lord of Grace Lutheran Church in Marana, Arizona. Welcome back to the Walk Through the Psalms Bible Study. Today we're going to look at Psalm 84, verses 11 through 12. Like 1,000 years, it begins with that phrase, 1,000 years, which is a common biblical theme, the 1,000 years. Let's take a look. I'll read through it and then share with you some of my thoughts. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than live in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. He bestows favor and honor. No good thing does the Lord withhold from those who walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, happy is everyone who trusts in you. So a day in your court is better than 1,000 years elsewhere. There's this kind of idea that to be in the presence of God, which is the theme throughout Psalm 84. Remember, it begins by talking about how beautiful it is, how lovely it is to be in God's dwelling place. And now, here we are, kind of wrapping up that psalm with saying not only is it lovely to be in God's dwelling place, but to be in God's dwelling place, a day is like 1,000 years. It's kind of an interesting way to talk about how, time flies for us. Sometimes they say time flies when you're having fun, but I almost believe it's the opposite. I think if you're really having fun, it feels like forever. I think back to some of the summers I had as a camp counselor, and for me, they were great summers. And now I look back on them, and I was like, well, it really was only anywhere from 9 to 11 weeks of work. And I was usually done with 2-3 weeks before school started again in August or September. And yet my memories of those times are so full of so many things in those weeks, because I don't think time flies when you're having fun. I think it stands still when you're having fun. I think time flies when you're just kind of doing lots of work. But that's how most of our lives are, right? It's a lot of work. World cannot be endless summer, right? But how often are those the times we remember the most? Or the times you're with that person you love and you look back and remember when you started dating, and those images loom big in your mind, but in reality, they weren't actually that long chronologically. But it felt like it. Why did it feel like it? It felt like it because it was full. It was rich. It was more real. See, I believe that when we are in God's presence, it isn't that we are being taken out of reality. It's that we are living more fully real, more in reality. It's so real. There's so much realness that it is as if it's 1,000 years. The time just goes by. So I think that's what they're talking about. A day in courts is better than 1,000 years. Now, I will jump ahead here for a second and show you, because there's a verse in 2 Peter that kind of is like this, that gets used for different things. So it says like this: "But do not ignore this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like 1 day." Now in 2 Peter, the issue is, when is Jesus coming again, and how long do we have to wait until Jesus comes again? And when is this resurrection going to happen? And when is Jesus going to come and bring the end times? And the writer of 2 Peter is trying to convince them, don't sit around waiting forever for this. And partly it feels like it, because it can feel, 1,000 years can feel like a day. A day can feel like a day for the Lord is like 1,000 years. Time doesn't work the same in God's way that it works for us. So the writer of 2 Peter is kind of implying that time for God is a little bit different. And this verse in turn then gets used out of its context to argue, going back to Genesis 1, that when it says that God created the world in 6 days and on the seventh day rested, that it says a day, but remember, a day is like 1,000 years, and so it really did take more time. It isn't, simply as full of poetry and metaphor. But in that case, God made the world in 6,000 years. You're still not anywhere close to the billions the age of the universe is. But, so that's kind of where it goes. But the idea of time when you are in God's presence being different than the rest of time, or feeling different, or being experienced that way and having a different meaning, I think that's very true. And that's what the psalmist is hitting on. And that's what I kind of think the writer of 2 Peter is getting at too, not trying to prove Genesis 1 literal. So there we go. The time is different. And then he says, I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of God than live in the tents of the wickedness. I'd rather be a doorkeeper. I'd rather have the worst job. Now, one of the things I didn't realize about being a doorkeeper in ancient times, well, actually, even not all that long ago, there's a play, I think it's August Strindberg has a play where he talks about this girl growing up and her dad is the gatekeeper. And what he has to do is he has to sit at this gate. And no matter when people come in, he has to wake up and he has to find out who they are, and he's got to open this thing. And so for years and years and years, the guy has never gotten a full night's sleep. And he gets a house, so he gets free housing because he gets to live right there, but he has to live in the guardhouse right by the gate with the pulleys and the cables and the ropes and everything, and he never gets a full night's sleep. It was a pretty miserable job, at least the way he describes it. I don't know if everywhere the gatekeeper had to live there and couldn't go home and rest on different shifts, but it was not ever considered the greatest job. I mean, even today, how much respect do we really give to the guy who's at the door at the hotel? I try my best to always be as respectful as I can with service people, but I am sure when you work at a fancy hotel, you deal with people with entitled attitudes who treat you like you're dirt, and you're just there to help, And so it's not the high prestige job. We'll say that at least, right? And yet the psalmist is saying, to be in God's house, to be in God's presence, it's worth even being the doorkeeper. The lowest person in God's house is greater than anywhere else, and says, I'd rather do it than live in the tents of wickedness. So he's comparing sort of having to live right at the gate to having, a tent. Well, you would assume it would be a fancy tent, right? These are ancient Middle Easterners. Better to be low in God's place because, again, and I think I mentioned this before, you think of the people like, who make choices to pursue a spiritual life or to pursue a calling that doesn't pay well, and people look at them like they're idiots. And why in the world would you do this when you could be, trading stocks or selling pharmaceuticals or something? And the answer always is that, there's a peace that comes with being in God's presence that makes this kind of stuff, makes the hard work and the menial work for the Lord better than having the fancy house. And then verse 11, for the Lord is a sun and shield. Sun and shield. What an interesting image. Sun and shield. The Lord provides me with the warmth, and the Lord also protects me. The Lord is both the sun that I need to guide myself by, the sun that I need to be able to see where I'm going. God is that sun, and at the same time, God also protects me. I'll admit I'm from Arizona, so when I see sun and I think shield, my first thing is, yes, you have to be protected from it, but that isn't where this is going, right? The shield isn't from the sun. The shield is from the enemies around us. He bestows favor and honor. He just bestows favor and honor. They're gifts from God. But it doesn't say that it's entirely conditional. It's a little bit. He goes on the rest of the verse. No good thing does the Lord withhold from those who walk uprightly. So you at least have to walk upright. But that's what you have to do. It doesn't say you have to walk perfect. It doesn't say you have to do everything exactly right. But the Lord gives good things to those who walk in his ways. And walking in his ways is greater than having all the wealth and power in the world. And then finally, happy is everyone who trusts in you. So again, getting rid of the anxiety about the future and having faith and trust in God and what God will do, that is happiness in that. And there's peace and contentment. So there we go. Psalm 84, verses 10 and 11. I hope you guys have a good week. We will continue with Psalm 85 next time. So I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you later. Bye.